Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the July 5th, 2016 meeting of the Downers Grove Village Council. Happy July to everyone. If you haven't already done so, there are copies of our agenda on either side of the room. Please feel free to pick one up and follow along with our proceedings tonight. There will be multiple opportunities for public comment, both with respect to items that are on our agenda tonight, as well as a segment under item 5, which is reserved for public comments of a general nature. And the protocol then is anyone who has a question or comment of a general nature with respect to something not on our agenda, we'll ask you to come to the podium, let us know who you are, and we'll, as always, welcome hearing from you. It is our proud custom, particularly on July 5th, to begin our meetings by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. So at this point, I'd like to ask everyone to please rise and join us in reciting the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Apparently I did not get the dark suit memo. I'd now like to ask our fine village clerk, April Holden, to please call the roll.
Commissioner Waldeck.
Here.
Commissioner White.
Here.
Commissioner Vatimo. Commissioner Jose.
Here.
Commissioner Olson.
Here.
Commissioner Barnett.
Here.
Mayor Tully.
Here. Thank you very much. It brings us to item 3, which pertains to minutes of council meeting minutes or prior minute meetings that we've held in this chamber. We have one set of minutes to review and approve tonight, and those are our minutes from our June 28, 2016 meeting. Are there any changes, corrections, or comments to that set of minutes? If not, I will ask for a motion to approve.
Mayor Tully, I move to approve the minutes from June 28, 2016.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Those minutes are approved. That brings us right to item 4. We have a special presentation tonight. We are very pleased to have with us tonight the president of the Downers Grove Economic Development Corporation, Michael Casa, who is going to deliver the quarterly report with respect to the status of the Downers Grove Economic Development Corporation and things under its purview. Welcome, Mr. Casa.
Good evening, Mayor Tully and village commissioners. Michael Casa, President and CEO of the Downers Grove Economic Development Corporation at 5159 Mokel in downtown Downers Grove. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I'd like to deliver my quarterly report. It's going to include a lot of data tonight, and some of this was data that was not available at the last time I gave my report because the state had not reported it. So let's just jump right in. We're going to talk about 2015 year-end sales taxes by category. And this is reported on an annual basis. While you cannot read this chart, it provides you with a list of each of the categories that the state has. It gives the municipal tax amount and the home rule tax amount, and then the total sales tax revenue collected by the village. The 2015 municipal tax was $12.9 million. The 2015 home rule tax revenue was $7.9 million for a total of $20.8 million. And one thing interesting to note is the top 3 revenue generators for the village are in order: drugs and miscellaneous retail, number 1, automotive and gas stations, number 2, and drinking and eating establishments, which is basically restaurants, number 3. Just to recap, in 2015, the village had an increase of 4% in its sales tax revenue over 2014. And in my report tonight, we're going to do a lot of comparisons, same period annual, same period by quarter. General merchandise, this is the first category we're going to cover. There was a slight increase in 2015 over 14. And one of the things I discovered is that Kohl's is categorized as a general merchandise store because there is no soft goods category that the state has. And this, of course, is our top retail segment that we're targeting as the attraction of a general merchandise store to Downers Grove. Food, which is basically grocery stores or the sale of food. There was a 6.6% increase in 2015 over 2014. Drinking and eating, which again is primarily restaurants, there was a 4.4% increase in 2015 over the previous year. Apparel, there was an increase of 1.15%, 1.25% increase over 2014. Furniture and appliances has represented our largest annual gain, 23.3% of an increase over the previous year, and that's due primarily to Art Van. The interesting part is that Art Van was only open for 5 months during the 2015 reporting period. So nearly a quarter, 25% increase nearly just after 5 months. Lumber, building, and hardware, home improvement it falls into this category. There was a 6.65% increase in 2015 over 2014. Automotive and gas stations. There was a decline last year of 3.62%, and most of the communities in the Chicago area experienced a decline. It is due to the drop in gas prices. The lower the gas prices, the lower the tax that's collected from it. Drugs and miscellaneous retail. This was down last year 5.7%. And I spoke to John Malanafi, who's sort of the guru of retail analysis, and we talked about several reasons for this. The one is more people are now ordering prescriptions through mail order because they can get them for multiple months, whereas a pharmacy will generally fill the prescription only for 30 days. This represented the only real decline of any segment in the Chicago area last year, a 2% decline. The odd part of this is, when I get to the quarterly numbers for this year, we've got a big increase, which I will confess I don't know the reason for that, but when we get to it, you'll see that the number just skyrocketed. Again, not sure why. I was assuming that the closure of the Walgreens at Lamont and 75th was a reason, but again, the quarterly numbers will show there's an increase even though that store is still closed. Manufacturers. Basically, this represents companies who manufacture a product in Downers Grove, and that product is subject to sales tax. And there was a 2.5% increase in 2015 over 2014. When we get to the quarterly numbers, you'll see an interesting result that I'll share with you then. Okay, so village sales tax and home rule sales tax revenue for the first quarter of 2016. So this is the most recent data that we have. Now, just to recap, there was roughly a 4% increase in the annual sales tax revenue, total sales tax revenue for the village in 2015 over 14. I'm happy to report that for the first quarter of 2016, there's a 7.25% increase over the previous quarter. So the first quarter of 15, 7.15% increase over the first quarter of 16. Let's go through the segments. I'm sorry, let me back up. The home rule sales tax revenue for the first quarter of this year is a 12% increase over the first quarter, same period, a year ago. The municipal sales tax is up 4.3%, again, over the same period a year ago. And then I gave the combined number of 7.15%. Okay, let's now go to the data by category for the first quarter of 2016. And the numbers were released not too long ago, maybe in the last 30 days or 45 days by the state, which, as you know, is now reporting numbers at a much slower pace than they used to. Again, these are the categories that the state uses. It's primarily through the use of SIC codes. And we will now cover each of these categories individually to see how they performed on a quarterly basis in Downers Grove. Again, we covered the total. General merchandise is, for the first quarter, was up 2.28% over the same quarter in 2015. Food, again, grocery stores. This is down 2.2%. I anticipated this would happen, at least in the first quarter, whenever a prominent competitor opens, which Mariano's did in Westmont in the first quarter of this year. I expected a dip. Actually, I thought it might even be more. So we'll have to keep an eye on this trend line. The grocery market in the Chicago area is not only very competitive, but it remains probably overbuilt and oversaturated. There are 7 grocery stores in Downers Grove. The Caputo's, Trader Joe's, Shop and Save, Ultra, Fresh Time, and 2 Jewels. And more communities are seeing a larger number of grocery stores. And one of the reasons for it is that if you're going to open a neighborhood retail center or even a large shopping center, typically getting that center built and getting it financed If it is grocery anchored, it tends to be easier to get done. For whatever reason, it seems to be the first choice of a lot of developers. However, the Chicago market is saturated. We need to keep an eye on this trend line, and also need to do all we can to help our existing grocery stores that are here in Downers Grove. Drinking and eating places, which I consider a real growth market in Downers, a 10% increase in the first quarter of 2016 over the first quarter of 2015. And again, there was a 4.5% increase for this segment for all of last year. Apparel was an 18.5% increase versus just over a 1% increase a year ago. So for the first quarter of this year, 18.5% increase. I do not know what that's attributable to. I know we have some more apparel stores that have opened. It seems like a large increase, and I will again try to dig deeper to try to discover that. But obviously that was it's news that's welcome. Furniture and appliances, almost a 40% increase from the first quarter of 2015 to the first quarter of 2016, and that is because of Art Van, which now would be, that covers 8 months of Art Van being opened. So it'll be interesting to see when we get to the third quarter, when they will have been open for a full year, what that number will be. It could be over 50%.
Can you go back and compare that number with the annual increase, with the annual difference of all the categories aggregated? I think that's pretty much the entire increase of the first quarter could be kind of at 207,000.
210.
Yes, I see what you're saying. That probably has a great deal to do with the overall number.
Or the vast majority of it, okay.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Lumber, building, and hardware, we saw a 7% increase, 7.7%, almost 8% increase from the first quarter of 15 to the first quarter of 16. Automotive and gas stations, there's a decline of 10.69% in the first quarter, again attributable to gas prices primarily. That's unfortunately a trend that is throughout the region, throughout the country. It's just something, again, we have to keep our eyes on to see if that stabilizes or if gas prices should change. Drugs, miscellaneous retail, again, very interesting. There was a small decline in the village for all of 15, and then the first quarter of 16, there's a 30% increase over the previous year. Maybe it's an aberration, I don't know. Again, we'll have to keep an eye on that to see if that trend continues. But we had a huge jump in sales tax revenue from that sector in the first quarter of this year versus a year ago. Manufacturers, 185% increase, and that's attributable, I believe, to one company, Alter Brewing, because the production of their beer, not the beer sold in the tap room, but the production of their beer counts as manufacturing. So even though the gross number is not large, the percentage is. Let me shift to hotel tax. Last year, we had a 6% increase annually on the hotel tax revenue compared to 2014. We are currently at almost 7.25%. That's the first quarter of 16 versus the first quarter of 15 is a 7.25% increase in hotel tax revenue, called hotel occupancy tax. Okay, let me shift and talk a bit about the sales tax base enhancement plan. Just to recap, the EDC worked with the village to retain a very prominent firm called AECOM. They developed a study of the Downers Grove in terms of its retail market, and you've all been presented with that report. And then on March 22nd, which is after my last quarterly report, we presented the sales tax base enhancement plan, which again worked very closely with the village staff on the development of the plan, which was presented to you on March 22nd. And I want to talk to you about some of the things that we're now doing, or things we've been doing that we're now enhancing to realize the success of this plan. The first thing I wanted to mention, though, before I get to that, is that AECom developed a tremendous amount of data for us. It came in basically two parts. One was the data that was reported in the actual final report, which, again, everyone saw. And then there's what seemed like an endless amount of just raw data that they provided to us. All of this was in their Excel files or in charts that they created. When the report came out in mid-January, it had covered the period up till about the end of November. So I'm going to be meeting with Chris Brewer, who is our project manager for AECom, to have all of the 15 data, and perhaps data since then, included or added to the Excel files and the charts that we were given. That's the first part, which they've agreed to do that. We're going to be meeting with them later in the month. The second part is to have a member of our staff basically become proficient in updating all those charts, all those Excel files, so we can do that in-house, so that as the state, as the village reports any new data, we immediately just plug it in. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. So we'll be able to provide to you, and really to anybody, on a very timely basis, the most updated data in the form that AECom developed. I think this will be a help to us, and hopefully it'll provide a more detailed reporting for the village. It is been a great help, a great benefit for us working with them. They basically, even though they completed this project, they still have some ownership in it, and they want to continue to help us use that data going forward. We also reviewed the Malanaphy report when it came out. That's the Chicago area retail report on sales that covers the entire Chicago area. Came out a little late this year. We didn't get our copy till the third week of May. John Malanaphy indicated to me that because the state reported its data late, he got his report out late. And we would like to try to find a way to incorporate his data also in the information that we maintain. So again, that's a process we're beginning to make sure that we have all of our files and charts as updated as we can. We have substantially accelerated our marketing in the commercial development area, retail, restaurants. Literally on a daily basis, we are interacting with the owners of Downers Grove shopping centers, retail and restaurant corporate real estate managers. Those are the people who work directly for the retailer, who handle their real estate. Commercial brokers who represent tenants. That's when they outsource that function. Commercial developers who are preferred developers for specific retailers, very common. Site consultants, and then organizations in which commercial brokers interact with, that give us a chance to get to know them. Participated in the ICSC Recon Show again in May, and several of the meetings that I had involved some of the large national developers who own Downers Grove shopping centers, talking about opportunities for redevelopment and opportunities for new tenants. And we utilize a service called CoStar. It's a national service that allows us to get site information, but also we get basically intelligence on existing retail leases. So basically any retailer in the Chicago area, we have access now to their lease agreement, when it's due, how much they're paying, what are the terms of that lease. And we are always looking for that, checking that information, because it tells us who's in our trade area, who's not in our trade area that may be looking for a site, and also what leases are coming due. And that helps, it's in addition to all the industry publications that we receive that gives us intelligence on which retailers are expanding and which are not expanding. And just a few of the retailers that have come to Downers Grove very recently. Chipotle, as you know, is going to be opening their new store this fall at the corner of Ogden and Saratoga. Grand Appliance and TV just had a grand opening in June for their store on Butterfield Road, just west of Highland. Duluth Trading is opening their very first clothing store in Illinois at Butterfield and Finley in the same center that Kohl's is in. On Tuesday morning opened at Butterfield Plaza, or is opening, And of course, you were very familiar with the Packey Web project, which we were very excited about, which will turn a long-standing, large, vacant commercial catalyst site into one of the largest dealerships, frankly, in terms of size in the western suburbs. That is our report. Hopefully I didn't talk too fast, but I wanted to be brief and give you a chance to ask any questions, and I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Casa, for the very thorough report, as always. I've got a couple of observations, but I'll keep them for the moment. Ask my colleagues if they have any questions of you at this point in time with respect to anything you presented in the report.
I do have a
Commissioner
couple,
White.
okay, I have a couple of suggestions for the future. I'm very pleased with this report for this evening. But in the future, I'd like to see the categories showing both gross and net of sales of the rebates. Because it's really after the rebates that we get to the bottom line that comes back to the village. For example, you know, Art Van is producing tremendous amounts of numbers, but we really don't know what that is net. Until we see net. So I'd like to see the gross number on the slide, and then the amount of the rebate and the net.
Okay.
On a similar vein, I think it would be helpful for all of us to understand the differential sales tax rates that apply to different categories, so that we know, you know, basically, some of these categories, we get a full 2% for every new dollar that's spent. Other categories, especially when there's rebates, we might get as little as 50 cents for every new dollar, you know, 0.5% for every new dollar spent. And that'll help us evaluate, at least help me evaluate where the emphasis should be.
Right.
You know, because basically, if we're going to spend tax dollars on economic development, which I fully support, I'll talk more about it in a minute, we want to maximize the return, maximize the value proposition for the village on the money that we invest in growing the sales tax base. So all in all, I think, I mean, you know, we're definitely on the right track. I will make this general observation, not so much about this report, but about economic development in general. I'm a strong proponent of economic development. I ran for the village council in 1993, and as part of my platform, I wanted to hire an economic development director, which we did not have at that time. And there's no question I completely and totally support this proposition. However, I want to make sure we stay focused on the type of activities that returns value to the village, the value proposition. And I know Commissioner Barnett said a number of times that, you know, just growing the real estate tax base doesn't really help if we don't increase the levy. You know, the school districts are in that boat, that increasing the value of an office building doesn't help their budget because it's the levy that's flat, or it's just, that's what's capped. So that's why I believe, and I've believed for many years, that sales tax, hotel tax, and similar taxes are where we can actually get return by investing money in EDC. And I strongly support investing money in EDC. We continue to do so, but I'd like to see, and as it's happening, the mission focused on growing something where we get return for that money, which is exactly what you're doing. We're on the right track. I'm very pleased with the report. So thank you.
Thank you. And we will definitely do those two, incorporate those two items in the next report.
Other questions, Commissioner Burnett?
Thanks, Mayor. Do you know, and you don't have to answer this now, certainly can circulate it later, the split in automotive and gas, between automotive and gas, between auto sales and gas sales?
It's not reported that way.
Can we get that from the state or no?
I don't
Really?
think so.
We can get it, but we can't use it for economic development purposes. We share it publicly.
But you can calculate the rebates.
Yes.
So the amount of sales tax
Yeah,
rebate,
We can back into it.
you can, you know, it won't be 100%, but you know, there's, you know, so if we know how many of the total auto sales are subject to rebate, how many are not, you know, and what percent of auto sales are subject to rebate, what percent are not, we can get an idea. On that point, Westmont's very interesting to look at too, because I think their gas auto went up despite the drop in sales tax. I mean, the drop in gas prices. Sorry.
No, that's fine. That's part of why I'm interested in it, because it helps understand what the rebate effects are. The other part of it is the, you know, nothing's ever totally fungible, but the units, I suspect in most of the other categories, units have probably increased to cause dollars to increase. Not likely a lot of that is price increase per se, whether it's Art Van or it's Kohl's or whomever else, it's likely unit increases. Whereas in automotive and gas, it's hard to tell, because you got that decline that you know is a function of price decline.
Sure.
It may still not be unit declines. And so as it relates to automotive, and the reason I'm focused on that is because pretty regularly, part of what we end up doing is evaluating situations that involve auto dealers. And so trying to understand how that breaks down would be helpful to me.
Should I just jump in? This is maybe very technical, but are gasoline sales subject to the home rule sales tax?
I think they are, I'll double check.
Okay, well, then we can tease it out very easily.
You just can't use it.
No, we won't get it from the state. We're deriving it from numbers that we're allowed to discuss
I
publicly.
was commenting on the absurdity of the premise.
Why is that the law?
Proprietary data for the car dealers. If there's one car dealer and you break out the number, then everyone knows exactly what their sales are.
Yeah, I believe the village is not permitted to report publicly beyond what they're given. And, like, in other words, if they certainly can't, I remember there was a retailer in town that was being wooed by a neighboring community, and I wanted to find out, the landlord wanted to find out what their annual sales were. And I called Dave, who said, don't ask that, you're not gonna get that information from us. Sometimes it's just not available. So the village can't release it publicly, and I think that's certainly one of them.
We sign disclosure agreements with the state, just will not allow us.
Okay.
You know, I will say this, gas station development is interesting. I get calls all the time from them. And they're always telling me how wonderful they are in generating sales tax revenue. However, they typically will only locate at a signalized intersection. And that, of course, is what everybody wants. So it is harder to attract a nice restaurant or a nice retailer than it is a gas station. Frankly, if I put a sign up that said gas stations welcome, and you can have all the best sites, that would be easy. But those catalyst sites, especially the ones at signalized intersections, are so valuable that trying to attract restaurants and retailers to those sites, with all due respect to my gas station friends, I think is a higher priority. I think that's how most communities feel when they don't have a ton of those type of sites available.
Well, gas is an interesting thing, too, because it's a little bit analogous to our utility taxes, right? I mean, if gas prices shoot up, then that's great for us, but on a longer-term analysis, everybody, whether it's this council or our residents or the businesses in the community, are trying to utilize less of something. And so if we're taxing that, I mean, you see where that heads. It's not a great long-term prospect. On top of that, as you indicated, locating new gas stations in town on new sites seems like a real long shot. So the mix of those two things together add to this conversation about automotive. I understand we've got some constraints on things, but as we set policy and think about development sites and opportunities that come before us, understanding some of that split, I think, would be useful.
Okay.
The other thing that I'd be interested in, Michael, not for tonight, but maybe for next quarter, the AECom report as well as the EDC's long-range plan, some comment in the future going forward on some things that perhaps the data is causing you to do different, if anything. We talk about some of the things like marketing for restaurants and going to trade shows and monitoring CoStar. Those are all things that you're doing and you've been doing. And so when we collect data, I always like to find out what, if anything, it's causing us to do differently from a decision-making standpoint going forward. Maybe it's just an reallocation of resources, like accelerate marketing for restaurants.
Sure.
Could well be. But I'd like to understand some of that forward, too.
Okay. I mean, I will make it a point to start passing on not just data, but information that I receive as part of the commercial development world. I get this stuff almost daily. I subscribe to all the leading retail and commercial development publications, newsletters. My inbox every day is overflowing. I go through it as quickly as I can, but I do come across some very interesting things. I recently passed on some information about multifamily development in the Chicago area. I saw a great article, and I passed it on to downtown management because they had some questions about multifamily development in our downtown. So I'll make sure to do that. When I see something that pertains to an important priority for the village, I'll make sure to pass that on.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments? Thank you for the report, and the figures, I think, are very compelling in a number of ways. I think it's worth pausing for a moment just to underscore the importance of economic development, and specifically the attraction and retention of businesses to our community and how important that is. And just to put this into context, picking up some of the figures that you shared with us, if we go back and look at the budget for fiscal year 2016, which we're currently in, our sales tax revenue for 2016 is estimated or budgeted to be approximately $12 million. Now, that's the number one source of revenue for our community. It's about 26% of our general fund revenues, 26% of our general fund revenues, which pay for most of the things that the residents of our community expect to receive from the village, comes from sales tax revenue. Property tax, by comparison, is budgeted for 2016 to be about 24% of our general fund revenues. In order to keep that property tax figure at 24%, or for it to even go lower, or at least not much higher, we need to continue this robust pursuit of both the attraction and retention of quality businesses in our community, because they do generate so much revenue. And again, I realize this is a gross figure, but let's just take the example of the revenue that was, the sales tax revenue generated by Art Van, a business that I know all of us in this room worked very hard, not only to get into Downers Grove, but to get them up and running in a manner that was conducive to the kind of results that we're talking about. I know this is a gross number, but just for illustration purposes, generating an additional $200,000 over an 8-month period in sales tax revenue underscores to me with big black Sharpie, pun intended, of how important this is. And so when we make decisions up here, we have to balance a number of different things in our community. It's all about balance. But in order to try to keep our revenue stream balanced, not overly dependent upon one thing, as I think was already mentioned to my left here, focusing on those things that we control as opposed to those things we don't control to try to generate, enhance our revenue for this community in order to keep the overall cost of living here down requires embracing these things pretty firmly. Some would say with both hands and all 10 fingers. So I appreciate the level of robust pursuit and the attention that we spend on this. Sometimes people ask, well, why are we spending so much time on these businesses? Well, I can give you 12 million reasons why. So I think it's important to pause and just appreciate why this is of such significance for the future of our community. Thank you for the report. Look forward to the next one.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioners, very much, and thank you, Mayor Tully.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Cassa. That brings us now to item 5, which is reserved for public comments of a general nature. As mentioned earlier, if there are any members of the audience who would like to make a comment or ask a question with respect to something that is not on tonight's agenda, I would ask that you please come down to the podium, introduce yourself, and we'd welcome hearing from you. Seeing as there's no one rushing the podium, I will thank you for being here nevertheless and move right to item 6, which is our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
Mayor Tully, I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Any questions or comments from members of the audience with respect to any items on tonight's consent agenda? Questions or comments from members of the village council? If not, roll call, please.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye, the consent agenda passes unanimously. That brings us to item 7, our active agenda. We have one item on our active agenda tonight. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance establishing provisions for mobile food vendors?
Mayor Tully, I move to adopt an ordinance establishing provisions for mobile food vendors as presented.
Second.
Any questions or comments on this item from members of the audience? Questions or comments from members of the village council? Commissioner White.
I just want to speak briefly that I have been in touch with the superintendent at District 99 about this, and there was a change. Basically, I think the practical effect is to prevent food trucks at Powers Park, which is immediately adjacent to the South High football stadium. The 99 board is going to discuss this, my understanding, at their June 18th meeting, and they may have suggestions for the future. But as of right now, I think they're protected with this change, and we're ready to go forward.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments from members of the council? Commissioner Waldeck.
Thank you, Mayor. In our last meeting, I suggested that we do show a preference for our brick and mortar restaurants if they decide to also operate a food truck. And hopefully in this experiment, we get some action from the brick and mortar restaurants. And we can always adjust the number of licenses. This is an experiment, And I look forward to the staff's report in upcoming months to see how that's working out. And, if need be, I hope they do take advantage of the opportunity that's given them. So, look forward to what's coming up, and I hope it's a great success. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments from members of the council? My only comment is that this is an example of taking a step, and I appreciate the expediency which both staff and council moved once this issue achieved the appropriate awareness, let's put it that way. This is an opportunity where we can help facilitate the success of businesses in our community. We saw some numbers up on the screen earlier, why it's important to attract and then facilitate the success of business in our community. I think this is a prime example of where we can do something to do that, and I'm very, very pleased that we are. Yes, this is an experiment, although I will say it's an informed experiment. This is not something we're doing in the dark. There are many, many communities that have experience with this, and some of the changes that we have made are those that are tailored it to our particular community. But yes, it is something that we will see what our experience is, and if the participation exceeds the number of licenses, certainly we can come back and add to it and make other further adjustments. But I'm glad that we're getting this going for the very reasons that have already been mentioned. And with that, I will ask for a roll call, please.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye, the matter passes unanimously and ends our active agenda. That brings us to item 8, our first reading on our workshop agenda. This is our more informal segment of our meeting where items are presented for discussion and consideration purposes only. No vote or other action will be taken at this time. Typically, what happens is I ask our village manager, Mr. Fieldman, to either introduce these items for discussion or to designate someone else to do that. And then typically the council will be offered an opportunity to ask questions of staff about the items since it's up for first presentment, and then I will turn it over to the audience for any questions or comments before coming back to the council. So with that said, Mr. Fieldman, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Tully. Thank you so much. There are 5 items on tonight's first reading agenda. The first 3 items concern awards of contracts for infrastructure maintenance. All 3 of these contracts support our goal of top quality infrastructure. Here to present background information on these 3 items is our Public Works Director, Nan Newland.
Good evening, Ms. Newland.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I have 3 items tonight. The first one is the 2016 Street Resurfacing Contract B. Is that- Motion is requested to award a contract for the 2016 Street Resurfacing Contract B to Geneva Construction Company of Aurora, Illinois, in the amount of $1,902,608.58. This contract is one component of the village's 2016 roadway maintenance program, which was referred to as ST004 in the Community Investment Plan. Other projects include the crack sealing contract and the 2016 resurfacing contract A, both of which have been previously awarded. And later this year, you'll also get a recommendation to award the 2016 fall roadway patching contract. The purpose of this work, as Dave said, is to keep the village's streets in a good, maintainable condition, and approximately $1.1 million of the funding for this contract comes from motor fuel tax funds. This is a list of the 15 street segments that will be performed in this contract. The work includes removal and replacement of curbs and gutter, pavement patching, ADA accommodations, and pavement milling and resurfacing. A call for bids was issued with 4 bids received. Geneva Construction was the lowest responsive bidder. They satisfactorily completed the village's 39th Street resurfacing project in 2008, the 2010 contracts A and B, and the paving portion of the Downers Grove Estates contract in 2014. Staff recommends award of the contract to Geneva Construction Company. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Questions, comments from members of the council? Questions or comments from members of the audience? Thank you. That'll bring us to 8B.
The next contract is the 2016 Water Main Improvement Contract A. In this case, a motion is requested to award a contract to Trine Construction Company of West Chicago in the amount of $762,694.50. This contract is a component of the 2016 Water Main Replacement Annual Element Contract, which is WA 028 in the Community Investment Plan. Other projects include water main replacement on Grand, which you previously awarded, and you will also be receiving in the near future a recommendation for water main improvement contract B. This project will consist of the installation of approximately 2,300 lineal feet of 8-inch water main, the replacement of 43 residential water services, and some concrete sidewalk and driveway removal and replacement, as well as restoration. On these 3 streets, we have it on Grant Street from Linscott to Prince, on Indianapolis from Douglas to Fairview, and on Lincoln from Douglas to Fairview. A call for bids was issued. We received 10 bids. Trine was the low responsive bidder. They have satisfactorily completed similar projects for Glen Ellen, Roselle, and Broadview, and received good recommendations. They also completed the 2013 Water Main Improvement Contract A for the village. And staff recommends award the contract to Trine, and I'd be happy to answer any questions on this contract.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the council on this contract? Questions or comments from the audience? Very good. That brings us to item 8C, please.
The last contract, this is parking deck rehabilitation and maintenance Phase 1. In 2004, the village constructed the parking deck in the downtown, which is a 5-story structure. And 12 years after construction, the deck is beginning to require increased maintenance on some of its structural and system components. In 2015, the village commissioned the development of a parking deck maintenance plan, and that includes an annual plan for these maintenance components, forecasted over the next 10 years so we can plan for those investments over time, with recommended maintenance activities and estimated costs for each of those phases. This is the first phase we're presenting to council. This phase includes concrete, masonry, and facade repairs, removal and replacement of some of the waterproofing materials, replacement of the 4th level sprinkler system, as well as some door and frame replacements. The work itself will be phased to have not minimal, but planned and expected a predictable impact on parking, which will be communicating to commuters and finding alternative parking for them. A call for bids was issued. We received 3 bids. Their low responsive bidder was J. Gill and Company. They received positive recommendations from the communities of Des Plaines, Arlington Heights, Elgin, and Bloomington for similar projects of similar scope. And staff recommends award the contract to J. Gill and Company, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the council? Just one real quick one. First of all, it's hard to believe it's been 12 years since the deck was built. Seems like it was just yesterday. That I was on a bus looking at other parking decks in other communities so we would know what elements we want to have in this one. So it's hard to believe that much time has passed. But that being said, the question I have is, I assume that given the passage of time, these are all maintenance requirements that were fully expected, and we're doing them consistent with when they were expected. So this is all planned and budgeted, given this type of a structure.
There's nothing they noted that was really unexpected, I think, for the age of the deck. It's just that we need to get started into the maintenance mode.
Sure, no difference than if someone had built a home after this length of time, there would be certain maintenance that you probably would have already had to have done.
Mm-hmm.
So there's nothing that, in terms of the materials or the construction methodology or anything else, that has caused us any maintenance issues prematurely.
No. The deck, a structure such as this is designed for a certain amount of movement, and the movement is what causes changes in things like the waterproofing, which you have to come back in and redo the waterproofing. So that's really the very expected type of maintenance activities.
Okay, very good. One last question, not necessarily with respect to this phase, but any phases for future maintenance of the parking structure. Actually, I believe that time has shown that many of the choices that we've made in terms of the height of the spandrels, types of lighting that were used, and other design features such as the transparency of the elevator shafts have all served us very well. But as we do this going forward, are there any other things that, different than when you build a house 10 years later, you always say, well, I wish I would have known what I know now, I would have changed something. Is there anything that any of the maintenance going forward gives us an opportunity to correct or change or improve from what we knew 12 years ago?
I think you'll be seeing a
And if
contract.
the answer is none, that's fine, I was just curious.
Just a couple things you will be seeing. You will be seeing a contract in the near future. We're going to be redoing the call boxes and video cameras to incorporate more recent technology. So I think in some cases, technology has just changed
Sure.
since then. The other thing you'll see, like with the next phase, is we'll be looking at some safety enhancements for the deck. So those are a couple of things you'll be seeing that won't be just strictly maintenance.
Terrific, thank you.
Mayor, could I ask?
Yes, of course.
Are we going to clean the stairwells as a part of this? As part of this contract?
This cleanliness of the deck is identified in the report. It's not specifically part of this contract, but it's being taken care of as part of our maintenance activity, our in-house maintenance efforts.
Thank you.
Questions or comments from the audience? Very good, thank you.
Thank you, Nan.
That brings us to 8D as in David.
The next two items are both related to the consolidation of emergency dispatching services, and they are both in support of the council's top priority action item, identify and execute a major consolidation. You may recall that the intergovernmental agreement with DUCOM, which is item E, was discussed by the council back in May, and the council directed us to pursue membership in this organization. Both items tonight will be presented by our Deputy Chief of Police, Shannon Gillette.
Good evening, Deputy Chief.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, council members. The first item I'd like to present is participation in the DuPage County Justice Information System. The DuPage County ETSB, or Emergency Telephone System Board, has partnered with the state's attorney's office to provide a consolidated computer-aided dispatch and records management system for all police and fire agencies throughout DuPage County. This countywide CAD and RMS system improves service levels and reduces annual costs. The Village of Downers Grove currently owns and operates its own CAD and RMS system. This system of hardware and software provides emergency call information for our first responders. It assists them in completing their incident reports and helps to manage archived information. The current CAD and RMS system is scheduled for replacement. To address this replacement, staff has recommended participation in the DuPage County Justice Information System. Highlights of that system include the consolidation of criminal justice data so that fire and police agencies across DuPage County can share this information. The system will also be fully integrated with the DuPage County State's Attorney's Office and will therefore eliminate the need to enter the same data at multiple points. The consolidated system will reduce the annual cost of providing CAD and RMS services by approximately $65,000 per year for the next 5 years. The DuPage County Justice Information System is scheduled for design and installation from September of 2016 through September of 2018, and we expect it to be fully operational by the end of 2019. And I'm happy to take any questions you may have regarding CAD and RMS.
Thank you. Questions or comments from members of the Village Council? Commissioner Burnett?
Thanks, Mayor. Are we still doing, I guess the right term, somebody over there will probably laugh at me, but pre-plan work through the fire department?
Yes.
And will that end up being part of what's, when we talk about first responders receiving information about a call, including maps, for instance, will that pre-plan work that we do be still distributed like
Yes.
it's been? Okay. All right. That's my only question. I thought that was a pretty big deal to not lose that.
Thanks, Commissioner. Other questions or comments from members of the council? Questions from the audience? Please. If you could come to the podium, sir, just so folks at home can hear you. Otherwise, yes. Otherwise, no one will hear you, and want to make sure that everyone gets the benefit of your question. Thank you.
Wait a minute.
Good evening.
This may show my stupidity, but I thought we were doing the dispatching for Westmont also.
Currently, yes.
Are they part of this project?
They have to make their own set of decisions and related to this CAD and RMS system, which will become more clear in actually the next item, which speaks of moving our dispatch system to Ducom. Westmont will be moving their dispatching services to Addison Consolidated Dispatch Center.
Okay, they're going to Addison.
That's what we understand.
Okay.
Right, so in short, yes, we currently do dispatching for Westmont as part of both Westmont's decisions and our decisions. We'll both be going to a more regional solution. Any other questions from the audience? All right, thank you. Go to the next one, please.
The next item I would like to present is an intergovernmental agreement with DuPage Public Safety Communications, otherwise known as DUCOM, to provide emergency dispatching services for the village of Downers Grove. The village currently owns and operates a consolidated emergency dispatch center. However, the continued operation of the center is not feasible due to changes in the state law and changes to DuPage County ETSB's policy concerning consolidation. On May 17th, Village Council directed staff to pursue membership in DUCOM, and as part of that process, staff has completed a thorough analysis and comparison of 10 key service areas. This analysis indicates that service levels provided by DUCOM vary slightly from the services provided by the Village Operations Center. However, staff is prepared and will change operations in a manner that residents and customers experience no material difference in service levels. Areas in which DUCOM provide the same or enhanced service levels include police, fire, and EMS dispatching services, fire alarm monitoring, major incident response, severe weather alerts, and the administration of our overnight parking permission. Areas that will require staff to make minor operational changes include Public Works dispatching, our police station after-hours lobby reception, severe weather incident tracking, administration of the law enforcement agency's data system, or LEADS, and the monitoring of video cameras at the Civic Center and the parking deck. The police station after-hour lobby reception is the only area in which residents and customers will notice a change in service levels. Upon transitioning to DUCOM, residents and customers who visit the police department after hour will pick up a phone and have direct contact with the dispatcher at DUCOM. That dispatcher will send an officer to meet with the resident or customer requesting service. To address the remaining areas, again, staff will change operations in a manner that residents and customers experience no material difference in service levels. Upon execution of the IGA, DUCOM will prepare a detailed technical transition plan for dispatching operations to be transitioned from DUCOM to DUCOM from the Village of Downers Grove. This transition is scheduled to start in the fall of 2016. We anticipate it to be completed by late spring or early summer of 2017. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Questions or comments from members of the council on this item? Commissioner Barnett?
Thanks, Mayor. Can somebody talk, and Shannon, I don't mean to put you on the spot, if it's, because I keep asking fire-related questions. I'd like a little more description of this, some of the changes to DUCOM as it results to fire dispatch that we think they're going to do. There's that.
They're doing them now, they just haven't been reviewed by ISO yet.
So we have every reason to believe that based on our experience with ISO, those changes will be acceptable to result in similar scores, right? Or improved scores, actually.
Yes. Yeah, they're prescriptive in nature, so if you do those things, you will get those
That's what you
scores.
get.
And so, yes, we're confident in that.
Okay. The fire alarm monitoring, talk a little bit more about that if you could. Where the annual cost of the village is whatever it is, $14 per alarm. Why are we deciding to continue to own and operate the receiver and be in the business of billing customers?
Yeah, there's two components to the fire alarm monitoring. One is monitoring the alarms and then responding if an alarm goes off. Under this proposal, that would shift to DUCOM. They offer that service as part of their normal intergovernmental agreement. The other is the administration of the fire alarm program itself. And Downers Grove is an industry leader nationwide in this regard, whereas most fire alarm systems require each business to pick out a system that is proprietary, only one system, and that is owned and maintained by the village, and then everybody has to use that system. Downers Grove actually invented and created an open system with one of our local vendors where you can choose as a business any fire alarm you want as long as it can communicate to our system. And that is something that keeps costs down by keeping competition up. And so we thought that was passed along to the benefit of our businesses and residents in the form of lower prices, so it made sense for us to keep that option available. When DUCOM learned of our system in our discussion of service levels, they're very interested in going to an open system as well.
Sure they are. That's not the type of thing that we can do more of for them or more of for another community?
We're talking about that right now.
Okay, all right. It's getting ahead of you, sorry. And then the last thing that this, as was described early on, this really isn't a choice. Tactical dispatchers provide communication support for police, fire, municipal EOC activations. In those kinds of major incident response situations, what would be the report talks a little bit about DUCOM essentially rolling out their mobile group. But how does that interact with some of our in-house things such as either 801 staff or public works folks? Those seem to be disconnected from that process. Talk a little bit more about how that connection happens down the road.
Yeah, that's something that it's getting pretty deep into the weeds and operations, and instead of attempting to address that here verbally, what I'd like to do is get a written response to you that can connect all those dots as to how the DUCOM tactical unit will interact with us at our EOC and officers and responders.
That'd be fine, Dave. I don't mean to sidetrack it. The whole thing makes me a little nervous because, police, fire, and public works is what we do, right? And we do it really, really well with really, really good people. And what we're getting here is a little higher cost and kind of, sort of, mostly the same service. And it's not a choice. This isn't because a bunch of people up here don't want to do something better. But, and I don't mean to diminish anybody's activities, but sort of regular, if you will, 911 calls, you have to assume DUCOM is doing a good job because they've been in this business for a long time, serving a lot of communities. But it's those things where stuff gets sideways that a lot of times are weather-related, sometimes they're school-related, and those are the things that I just have this kind of hesitancy about the whole program. I mean, we have to do it and we're going to make the best of it, but those are the kinds of things that worry me a little bit because they're not so run-of-the-mill. And there's been enough events just in my short time up here to say that our group of people and our systems are really good at it. So I hate to lose that. So if you could, Dave, as we go forward, give us a little bit more, just if nothing else, make me feel better about it.
Will do.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments? Commissioner Waldeck?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your report. And actually, I think you were way too kind in saying that that under the new state law, it isn't feasible to operate our VOC. Actually, feasible would be the wrong word. We're kind of forced into this. We can't operate our own VOC under current conditions. So it isn't much of a choice, so we have to do the best we can with what DUCOM has to offer. And I encourage our residents to take a look at the items that appear on the website on the issue and read about it. It's going to cost us more. We're going to have similar service. There's a lot of promises there, and we're going to have to monitor that and do what we can. The things that we've done well, I think Commissioner Bartek probably was leading into that, was that the things that we do well that we need to influence DUCOM into doing it the Downers Grove way rather than their way. So obviously, I don't want the residents to get the impression that, oh, we can keep things the way they are, or we're just, as a council, just changing things. We aren't, we really don't have that choice. And that's too bad because we our police and fire services are key, and we've operated for decades, and we're very proud of our current service. And hopefully this is for the better, but it will cost more too. Just a warning. Thank you, Council.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Olson?
Thank you. I just want to thank the staff for all their work on this item. I know this is certainly not easy to go through this transition plan and to develop this, but I think I really appreciate the service analysis, very detailed, and I just want to thank everyone for that. I note with what Commissioner Waldeck said regarding the cost, and I think the one silver lining here is that our facility plan is fortuitously timed with this transition, and so the reduction of space needed for this center in the renovated police station, I think will allow us to keep costs down for that project. And I think in that way, we can save the taxpayers money and some of that money that we perhaps would have, a little bit, we have to pay a little bit extra for this service, the consolidated service, but we're able to save some by not having to move or renovate or et cetera, our own center. And I think that will save some money. So I do want to just note that for the record.
Thank you, Commissioner. If I could just put a finer point on that. Item D, we talked about the countywide CAD system saving us money. That saves us about $65,000 a year. Mr. Baker will highlight the issue you just talked about. The annual savings due to the reduction in scope, and the police station project will save us somewhere between $70,000 and $100,000 a year compared to what we thought. And the additional costs of moving to DUCOM will increase costs by about $118,000, $120,000 a year. So you take all that in, it's a slight savings. I'm calling it about a wash, all three moving parts.
Thanks for that finer point. I'll just add to the context that, as I've said before, from a historical perspective, we as a community, along with other communities, have long responsibly studied carefully a potential move to a regional solution for a variety of different things. Those discussions continue to go on as we speak with respect to other traditional municipal services, and when it makes sense to do something, then you'd be irresponsible not to look at it. A number of years ago, and I use this example all the time, we looked at whether or not we were going to go from our local SWAT team service to a regional solution through Fiat. There was a fair amount of discussion back at the time as whether we were better with what we had, which was working very well, or going to a regional solution. And at the time, there was clearly a trend towards going to more regional solutions. I think that trend has kicked up quite a bit since then. That doesn't mean you always do it just because every other community is doing it doesn't mean we have to do it. But clearly, it's the trend not only in Illinois but throughout the country. And when it makes sense to do it, then it's something we need to look at very carefully. And for various reasons, the stars weren't aligned previously. But we always were watching the stars to see when they might come into alignment for various reasons. And for those who sort of asked, and I say not here, but generally, why are we doing this and why now? It's because a number of different things have come into alignment. Not only has the trend towards regional solution intensified, but the interest in fact, I would say carrot and the stick of consolidation has intensified a great deal in the last 5 years, especially over the last 10 years. But also, as some of my colleagues have noted, there has been a change in law and change in policy that is beyond our control in terms of what you can and can't do with running a dispatch center. So this is inevitable. But I'm glad that we are taking that inevitability, and rather than simply letting it happen to us, seizing the bull by the horns, and in many respects, we are doing this on our terms in the Downers Grove way as much as possible, which if we'd sort of let this happen to us eventually, I'm not so sure that would have been the case, but by being proactive about it, making our choices, and influencing the situation, I think we're in a far better position than if we'd simply allowed this to happen to us. So I'm very pleased to see that. The other thing that I think is important is that in terms of the alignment of different factors is DUCOM in many respects has grown up and is now at a level of service where we are comfortable with it, and I think we've verified that through intensive analysis and inspection of how they do things. And yes, well, there are some differences, but the important thing to underscore is that for the experience of the resident and the customer, what Deputy Chief Gillette said, that they will see no material difference in service level other than the 24/7 window that they currently can take advantage of over at the police station. But other than that, there should be no external difference in the service levels. In terms of cost, as was mentioned, overall, if you look at all the different moving parts, this should be mostly a wash. And again, I'm pleased to see that for something that was going to be inevitable, that it's not really coming to us at a greater cost, and hopefully we'll see some long-term savings. I also want to just mention that when I say it was inevitable, it was, but that doesn't mean that we just threw our hands up and didn't explore other options. We did. We explored several other options of trying to do things in cooperation with other communities and other solutions, and they didn't work out. So this isn't something, once again, that we just accepted. It's something that we did take steps to try to come up with other solutions. Those solutions didn't ultimately pan out or weren't made available to us. And then another push-pull, if you will, for the conversation now was we did have to commit to some choices with respect to our facilities conversation on the police station, the VOC being a major component of that. So it does all sort of come together at the same time. But I think all things considered, given that this was something that eventually was going to be thrust upon us, we seized the opportunity to actually guide and influence the circumstances to the best of our ability. And I really appreciate everyone who's been involved in that. Because when you say there are moving parts, that is a gross understatement. This is a very sophisticated and complex set of arrangements and policies and practices, which I think we're doing a very good job of not only managing, but I would say mastering. So I wanted to extend my thanks for everyone who's been involved in that. Questions or comments on this item from members of the audience? Hearing none, Deputy Chief Jill, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just one final note before we move on. I mentioned earlier that we had invented an open system. That is actually true, and I want to thank Chief Jim Jackson, who has a vast knowledge about fire alarm systems. He actually worked with many vendors to actually come up with that. If you'd like to learn more about that, you can actually just search wireless fire alarms on our top story section, and you'll find out a couple years ago that it was a truly innovative service enhancement. So thank you to Chief Jackson. And with that, that ends our first reading tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That brings us to item 9, which is the mayor's report. Just very quickly, want to thank everyone who came out for both the Independence Day parade. It had to be a record turnout. There was great crowds. It was wonderful to see everyone along the parade route, as well as all the folks and community groups and organizations that participated in the parade, and also then went to the south end of town to, I think half the town was at Commissioner Waldak's barbecue, and the other half of the town was watching the fireworks. Another great example of celebrating our nation's birthday in a safe and festive manner. So I want to thank everyone for contributing to that. That's all I have on my report. We'll go to item 10, which is the mayor's report. Back to Mr. Fieldman.
Thank you. I'm going to hand it over to Deputy Village Manager Mike Baker for an update on the police station project. Mike.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Baker.
Thank you, Dave. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. This is a topic I can keep fairly brief because it's already received some attention. Thank you very much. But I did want to let the council and community know about some of the recent activities related to our facilities plan, specifically the plan to renovate and construct an addition onto the police station. For obvious reasons, we've spent quite a bit of time working with our architect, working with the police leadership to verify and make sure that the space program was accurate, especially with the decision to consider membership in DUCOM. And based on that analysis, we have been able to confirm that the space program can in fact be reduced by approximately 2,200 square feet, which is roughly the size of the current dispatch operation, without impacting other portions of the facility or how it operates. And with that reduction in the amount of space that's required, essentially the size that the addition has to be, that also carries with it a reduction in cost, where we estimate that preliminarily, that the estimated cost of the project will be reduced by between $1 million and $1.5 million as a result of not having to construct a dispatch center into the improved facility. As was indicated, this would have an impact if we were to issue bonds of lowering the amount that would have to be issued, which could save between $70,000 and $105,000 a year. So more to come. Obviously, work continues, but this was an important piece to review before we proceed with next steps on the project.
Very good. Appreciate the update, and I know there will be many more to come as this project picks up speed and becomes visual. I think that what is planned in terms of the frequency of updates as it makes sense, or Are we going to, looking down the road, do something similar that we've done with other major capital projects where there's been a regular update, even if the update was all's well?
I think what we'll do is we'll go with monthly updates. In fact, you'll see agenda items next month, so it'll become apparent, the contract with the architect, the contract with the construction manager, all coming our way next month. And then from there, it goes visual with schematic designs, and then we're into construction. So it'll be probably a monthly update, also particularly council actions the next couple of months.
Very good. We'll look forward to that. Questions or comments, Mr. Baker, from the council?
Quick comment,
Commissioner
Mayor.
Waldeck? Sure.
I want to thank Mr. Baker because now the local papers have a headline, Downers Grove Update Space Program. That's it.
How's that feed from Jupiter looking?
That is our report.
Good comment. Any other questions, comments? All right, very good. Thank you very much for that update. That brings us to item 11, our village attorney's report. Ms. Petrarca, good evening.
Good evening, there are no reports tonight, thank you.
Very good. That brings us to item 12, council member reports. This is an opportunity for members of the village council to share with the audience and their colleagues items of interest or other goings-on in the community, or to discharge their obligations as liaisons to other bodies. I'll start with Commissioner Jose. Good evening.
No report, Mayor, thank you.
Commissioner Waldeck.
No report, Mayor.
Very good. Commissioner Barnett.
Mayor, just one thing as a heads up, for my colleagues to watch Friday's agenda in particular. I'm intending to submit to Dave tomorrow per our normal rules, a new business item. Ideally, it'll be on next week's agenda concerning downtown development, and it will have to do with the idea of moratoriums. More coming soon. I'm still working on the wording to try and get it right and have it narrow and focused enough. But so keep your eyes peeled, that'll be coming next week.
I appreciate the heads up. Commissioner White.
No report.
And Commissioner Olson.
I just want to echo what the mayor said. Thanks to everyone who came out for the Independence Day Parade. And I also wanted to note regarding the fireworks, it is a great joint effort. Darien and Woodridge as well, I believe, participate in that. And it was a great show this year. Really enjoyed it, and I hope everyone got a chance to enjoy it as well. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you. And I have nothing further to add at this point, so with that, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you and good night.